Now, we have some animals from the time of Cambrian period. For example, we have starfish, jellyfish, worms, snails. However, we also have animals called trilobites. Trilobites are extinct species, which means we do not have trilobites anymore. They lived 540 million years ago, more than 500 million years ago, and they became extinct. So this fossil, you see a trilobite fossil, which is 520 million years old. If you check the eye structure of the trilobite, you see the trilobite eye over here, you come across a very complex eye system. You see, it's called a compound eye system. It consists of many honeycomb-like cells, as you see over here. Hundreds of them. Each eye has about 300 honeycomb-like cells. In both eyes, there are like 600 honeycomb-like cells. And each honeycomb-like cell has double lenses with different refractive indices. So there are like more than 1,000 lenses in both eyes of a trilobite. This is an incredibly complex eye system. And this is the first eye in the history of life. We have the same eye structure in modern insects, in modern animals, such as dragonfly, honeybee, has exactly the same eye structure. This is a very good evidence for creation because the first eye in the history of life is as complex as the modern eye. Remember what evolutionists required? They said there should be a progression from primitive to complex, step by step. However, the first eye in the history of life is extremely complex as the modern eye, is the same as the modern eye. So there is no progression from primitive to complex. And this is a very good evidence, again, in exalted creation, omnipotent intelligence of God. This is a very good evidence for creation and falsifies all the claims of the theory of evolution. Now, what about the other claims of the theory of evolution? And I call them fairy tales, tale in a tale. And I want to start with the myth called transition from water to land. Evolutionists claim the fish stepped on the land and was transformed, evolved into land animals. That's the allegation. However, this is scientifically impossible. And I will tell you why. First, the fish, the sea animals, and the land animals, the reptiles, have completely different systems. And any transformation of these systems into other systems is impossible. Let's see why. For example, fish have fins. Those should turn into feet to become a land animal. Fish breathe by their gills. Those should turn into lung. Weight-carrying systems of fish is adapted to live in water. This should be adapted to live on land. The metabolisms of fish are adapted to live in water. This should be adapted to live on land. And all these have to occur at the same time in the same animal in order for this animal to survive. However, it is impossible. Let me explain you on an example. For example, the fish breathe by their gills. And these gills, according to the evolutionists, should transform into lungs. So they're both complex organ systems, and they're perfect. However, if any change from the gills toward the direction of the lung, these gills will be dysfunctional. So any intermediate stage, any transformation, any change from the gills toward the lung, each intermediate stage will be dysfunctional, and since this animal loses its gill and it doesn't have a lung either, it will die, of course. And again, even according to the evolutionists, these changes did not happen all at once. However, all these changes have to be at the same time, suddenly in the same animal, for these animals to survive. Basically, scientific evidence shows all the observation experiments falsify the theory of evolution because these changes cannot occur. Any intermediate stage will be dysfunctional, and a fish cannot transform into lung by coincidences as the theory of evolution claims. Now, evolutionists claimed, you see a coelacanth fossil over here. They claimed coelacanth is the ancestor of the land animals, so-called transitional forms from fish into land animals. They said the coelacanth fossil, which is you see over here, has a large brain. It has lung. It has feet, and it is a surface fish ready to step on the land. However, in 1938, they found the first living sample of a coelacanth. It turned out, and since then they have found more than 200 samples of this fish, it turned out coelacanth is not a surface fish. It is a deep sea fish. It never goes about 180 meters. It doesn't go about 180 meters. It lives below 180 meters. It doesn't have a brain, a large brain. It has a fish brain. It doesn't have feet. It has gills. It has fins. And it doesn't have a lung. It has gill. So it is a fish, and they apologize, of course. What about the origin of birds? Evolutionists try to explain the origin of flight. They have several scenarios, imaginary scenarios. Now I'll go into detail. Of course, the birds are perfect animals. You see, they show excellent aerodynamic techniques over here, which are trying to be imitated technologically today. So they are perfect animals. Evolutionists try to explain the origin of flight. Now let's see their imaginary scenarios. These are from evolutionist textbooks. I didn't do this. This is not to put the evolutionary theory down. These are from evolutionist textbooks. According to the theory of evolution, there are two scenarios for the origin of flight. The first one is called cursorial. The second one is called arboreal. According to the cursorial theory, which was developed by John Astrom from Yale University, cursorial theory claims that the dinosaurs, which were running on the land, trying to catch the flies, they transformed, evolved into birds, and started to fly. The second theory, some of the scientists, they didn't like this first theory, and the cursorial theory, and they developed the second one. It's called arboreal theory. According to the arboreal theory, the dinosaurs, huge dinosaurs, jumping from trees to trees, they transformed into birds and started to fly. So, of course, you may think that these are two Latin names. They may have some scientific credibility. However, I will explain to you, they do not have any scientific credibility. They are against logic, against all the scientific observations and experiments, actually. Now, you see over here, the dinosaurs, these are again from the evolutionist textbooks, trying to chase, they are chasing flies. You see, a dinosaur is chasing a fly. It's about to catch it, hopes it's catching it, and transforms into bird and flies. So, this is from evolutionist textbooks. They're trying to explain the origin of flight with these illustrations. But I want you to pay attention over here. They're trying to explain the origin of flight. However, one of the objects is already flying, the flies. So they're trying to explain the origin of flight with a flying object, actually. If they are asked about the origin of flight in the insects, they do not have any answer. They cannot even say one single word. So basically, as you see, these are so-called tail-in-a-tail imaginary scenarios. They never happen. It is against logic, against all the scientific evidences. Insects, the flies, they have an incredible flying technique. As you see over here, they are perfect animals. Some of the flies, they can beat their wings 1,000, sometimes 2,000 times a second. This is an unimaginably complex technique they use, which could not be imitated even the 21st technology of today. The flying techniques of the insects were applied into computers, and they were used in the so-called famous Sikorsky helicopters, actually. They're trying to be imitated. However, they could not imitate it because, for example, a robot fly was produced in the Max Planck Technological Institute in Germany just to try to imitate the flying technique of the insects. So insects can beat their wings 1,000, 2,000 times a second with a very special technique. Just by doing research on this technique, the scientists have discovered new aerodynamic laws. However, the robot fly they produced in these modern labs in Germany could only beat their wings 5 times in one time in 5 seconds, and of course it couldn't fly. So basically, again, all these scenarios are against logic, against scientific observations and experiments, and falsifies all the claims of the theory of evolution and proves the fact of creation, because birds were created in the history of life as birds. And insects, they have been flying since the very beginning, since millions of years.